Hello duelists, Russ here, and today we are finally going to be opening Structure Deck Alba Strike. As usual, inside the box we have the Structure Deck itself, a paper playmat, and a bonus pack, this time called the Recollections of Fate pack. This time, the playmat features the two new Elba Dragons clashing against each other. On the left we have Mirrorjade of the Iceblades, and on the right, Lubellion of the Searing Flames. And on the back of the playmat, other than the usual strategy and combo guide, we've got this nice little section with the artwork that will be featured on the tokens in the Recollections of Fate pack, with a bit of lore, I guess you could say, but it's all written very cryptically in like poetry, so there's nothing really clear here, but it kind of shows the story of how Ecclesia and Albaz got to where they are today. So on top we have Ecclesia and Flordelis in their younger days, back when they were both part of Dragma, and of course Albur, Albaz's mysterious like counter half, lurking in the shadows over there. And now here we have Ecclesia, and on the middle we have Ecclesia and Albaz in the middle of their journey, and finally at the bottom is where the story currently is at, with like the Dragma Nation revealing themselves to be the evil Despia archetype, and then the two Albazes clashing, and of course Flordelis now in her Sword Soul form clashing against the Dragma leader. Now let's take a look at the structure deck, starting with Mirrorjade, the Iceblade Dragon. So this is supposed to be Fallen of Albaz's newest dragon form, and from the design and name it seems that he's kind of like inherited or absorbed some power from the Sword Soul and Ice Jade archetypes in order to achieve this new like ultimate form, because like Iceblade is like half Ice Jade and half Sword Soul. And what's really cool about this guy is that in his artwork you can see these like 4 icicles over there. Those are Iceblade tokens. They're summoned by the effect of a new trap in this structure deck called Branded Blade, and basically they have the same stats as the previous 4 Albaz Dragons, and if you look closely, each of them represent like, they kind of have like a silhouette inside. Those are like the silhouettes of the previous 4 dragons, which is very cool. So to fusion summon this monster, you'll have to fuse Fallen of Albaz plus 1 fusion Synchro Xyz or Link monster. So that really makes this guy feel like an evolution over the previous Albaz Dragons, and of course, the awesome part of this is that making use of Fallen of Albaz's effects, you can basically super poly away the opponent's fusion Synchro Xyz or Link monsters in order to make this guy on your field. First effect, you can only control 1 Mirrorjade. Second effect, once per turn, quick effect, you can send 1 fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albaz as material from your extra deck to the grave in order to banish 1 monster on the field, so very powerful removal. However, this effect cannot be used against next turn. So although this is a really powerful effect that can be used during either player's turn, you can never use it for 2 turns in a row. So you blast it once, and then the turn after that, you give your opponent a little opening in order to get rid of this guy. Third and final effect, if this fusion summon card in its owner's control leaves the field by your opponent, you can activate this effect to destroy all monsters your opponent controls during the end phase of this turn. So I just love how absolute zero that effect is. Man, that is awesome. Okay, so you guys will also notice that this is a dark attribute monster with 3000 attack and 2500 defense, because when we take a look at the next one, Lubellion, you'll see he's the complete reverse, light attribute, 2500 attack and 3000 defense. So these two guys here are counterparts, and while this guy is technically also an Elba Dragon, in the lore it is much more likely that he's supposed to be Albur. I'm not sure how you pronounce the name in the TCG, but the Jester of the Despia, the red-haired like version of the red-haired evil counterpart to Albaz that has appeared in the story recently. So this monster's fusion materials are 1 dark monster plus Fallen of Albaz, so very easy to fuse out in an Elba deck since all of the other Elba Dragons are dark attributes. So in a sense, kind of like an evolution over them as well, similar to Mirrorjade. However, the really cool and interesting part about these fusion conditions is the wording. The fact that Fallen of Albaz is specifically listed as the second material instead of the first, unlike all of the Elba Dragons. So it's like really emphasizing that this guy is like not Albaz himself. This card name's effect can only be activated once per turn. If this card is fusion summoned, you can discard 1 card to fusion summon 1 level 8 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck except Lubellion, level 8 by the way, by shuffling fusion materials listed on it into the deck from among your cards on the field in your graveyard and or your face-up banished cards. But for the rest of this turn, this card cannot attack, and you also cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except fusion monsters. So this is the second Alba Dragon to let you fuse when you fuse, which really adds to the deck's ability to just set up your field presence, and it's super convenient as well because when you fusion summon this guy and you send those materials to the grave, you can then shuffle those materials back into the deck as the materials for your second fusion summon, leading into either Mirrorjade or any of the other Elba Dragons that you wish to summon depending on the situation. And what's really interesting about this is that this makes Lubellion feel more like a transitionary stage or like just a combo piece rather than your boss or your finisher, especially since he won't be able to attack the turn you get his extra fusion effects off. So I don't know, it just really makes me feel like what we're seeing now is like just a premonition or an omen of something even more sinister to come from Albaz. So maybe in the next main booster, as this story of like the Dragma, Albaz and Ecclesia continues, we'll see this even more crazy light attribute evil version of like the Elba Dragons, which I'm really looking forward to. Okay, now let's put him over there in order to match the Mirrorjade on the left, and up next we have the super powerful new fusion card in this deck, Branded Fusion. You can only activate one card with this name per turn, and you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck during the turn you activate this card except fusion monsters. Fusion summon one fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albaz as material from your extra deck using two monsters from your hand, deck, or field as fusion material. Very simple, very strong, very good. Okay, and of course with Branded in its name, it can easily be searched out by the support cards in the deck as well. Okay, now moving on into main deck monsters. First, we have a new member of the Tri-Brigade, Mercurial. You can only activate this card name's first and second effects once per turn. First effect. When your opponent activates a monster effect while you control a fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albaz as material, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand or field to the grave in order to negate that effect. So a very powerful hand trap to have on hand for your Elba deck. I mean, if you have this guy in tandem with Mirrorjade's once per every 2 turns banish, it's probably going to be very difficult for your opponent to break through your formation once you have this all set up. Second effect, if this card is banished, you can add one Fallen of Albaz or one monster that lists that card in its text from your deck to your hand except Mercurial itself. So I mean, it's probably not going to be very difficult to banish this guy as fusion material, especially after you've sent him to the grave, in order to stun your opponent's effects. Next we have Spriggans Kits. So this was our good old tinkerer of the Tri-Brigade, who I guess has just customized herself to become a Spriggans herself, one of her own creations. This card name's first and second effects can only be activated once per turn. First effect. If you have a fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albaz as material on your field or in your grave, you can special summon this card from your hand. Okay. Having one on your field already makes this very handy, but having the condition include being in your grave as well is just sick. Because even if your first move is Mirrorjade, Mirrorjade's effect in order to banish the opponent will force you to drop one of your Alba Dragons from your extra deck to the grave as well, basically unlocking this condition. Second effect, if this card is normal or special summon, you can add one of your branded spell traps that is banished or in your deck or your graveyard to your hand. So a search from deck, graveyard, or banished? Are you serious? And of course, this guy can come back, no matter where he is. Then place one card from your hand on the bottom of the deck. Okay, yes, so for those of you guys who don't know, this structure deck is actually a bit more expensive, just a few more dollars compared to the typical structure decks we get on the OCG. And that is like just testament to how legit this deck is competitively. Like, I've seen some videos of what you can do literally with just 3 copies of this deck and it's just insane. This card named second effect can only be activated once per turn. First effect. When a monster declares an attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, negate the attack. Then if you control a fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albaz yada yada as material, you can destroy the monster that declared an attack? Okay, that sounds pretty insane in certain situations. And second effect, if a monster is banished face up, except during the damage step, which is something your Mirrorjade can very easily achieve, you can banish this card from your field or graveyard to special summon a light spellcaster from your hand or graveyard whose attack equals its own defense. Well, clearly the target for that special summon is supposed to be Ecclesia, but it's interesting that that first effect isn't limited by name once per turn, because wouldn't it be I don't know, pretty busted if you had like 2 or 3 copies of this guy in your hand and you just use him repeatedly. But I guess since it's just responding to an attack, compared to the other 2 that like really help to set up and continue your deck's combos, I feel like it might not be as strong comparatively, so it might not be something you want to run that many copies of. Okay, next we have a new spell, Lost. Okay, the literal translation of the card name seems to be Lost Brand, but I think it's supposed to be a bit of a pun, which is why it's going to be localized as Paradise Branded. It's a continuous spell, and this card name's second effect can only be activated once per turn. First effect: the activation of your cards and effects that include an effect that fusion summons a fusion monster cannot be negated. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects when a monster is fusion summoned this way. Pretty insane. Second effect: if you fusion summon a fusion monster, except during the damage step, you can add 1 Fallen of Albaz or 1 monster that lists that card in its text from your deck to your hand. Wow! So on top of protecting all of your fusion effects from being stopped by the opponent, when you fuse, it lets you just get more of the materials in order to set up even more of those fusion combos. That's crazy. Okay, next we have Branded Blade, so this is the card that summons those Iceblade tokens. You can only use one of this card name's effects per turn and only once that turn. First effect: banish any number of branded spell traps from your grave and special summon that many Iceblade tokens. They are Dragon, Dark, level 8 with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, so the ghosts of the Elba Dragons past returning to assist you on the field. Second effect: you can banish this card from your grave, then target one of your banished Fallen of Albaz or monsters that specifically list that card in its text and add it to your hand. Okay, not too bad. Next we have, what is this? Branded Condemnation, and I just love the artwork on this card. Like, it just depicts so well all the heat and action happening in the climax of the story happening right now, with Iris Sword Soul, which is like Flordalis, sacrificing her allegiance to the Drachma as one of the noble saints and knights, and then transitioning to the power of Sword Soul and now slashing at her previous leader, the corrupted Drachma Maximus. That is just so awesome. Anyway, this card, you can only activate one of this card name's effects per turn and only once that turn. First effect: when a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster, return a fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albaz as material to the extra deck, 1 from your field face up or 2 from your grave, and if you do, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Okay, that is pretty handy. I think potentially the cost to return 2 from your grave can be considered very cheap if you're gonna... I mean, this deck generally wants you to fusion summon a lot, right? And with Mirrorjade's effect as well, you'll really be piling up your graveyard with a lot of Alba Dragons, so effectively you could kind of negate the opponent for free. Second effect: you can banish this card from your grave, then target 1 branded spell trap in your grave except this one and add it to your hand. Okay, so cycling back Branded Fusion once again, and like it just... the cycle goes on and on and on. Okay, and it looks like that is going to be all for the new cards. Now let's take a look at the reprints. Okay, so starting off, we of course have Fallen of Albaz. This deck is not going to be playable without him, so they definitely have to include 1 copy of this guy. And of course, this is his that stage that he went through like 2 boosters ago. The Black Cloak Dragon Albion, Flordalis, Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, Thunder the King, Levionier, Chaos, another Kaiju. I think that's 2 Kaijus, right? Artifact Death Scythe. Oh, Y Buster. And Collapse Serpent as well for the light dark, that, you know, that little engine that we've been having for the longest time. Safe Arts as well. Oh, this is the... what's his TCG name? Right, Keeper of Dragon Magic, and this guy, once you normal or special summon him, you can discard a card to search your deck for any polymerization or fusion normal spell. And hey, Branded Fusion contains fusion in its name, so interesting how this guy is gonna be so useful here. Summoner Monk, Yugioh OCG, Effect Veiler, yep, so just hand traps, Rauba Wu, and here we are going into the spells. Is this the White Brand? Sorry if I get the English TCG names wrong with these guys, because I realized for the Branded series they really have changed the names quite a bit, moving between English and Japanese. So this is the Bond of the Branded, Fusion Gates, Fusion Recycling Plants, more Fusion Support, Gold Sarcophagus, some pots, Called by the Grave, a card that we see quite a lot in the competitive scene nowadays. Dark Ruler No More, I think is pretty good as well. This is Screams of the Branded. More Judgment of the Branded, I believe. Necrofusion as well. Back to the front lines. Ice Dragon's Prison. There can be only one, I believe. Dimensional Barrier. Waking the Dragon. Is that the name of this card? And that will be all for the main deck. Now for the extra deck reprints, I mean, you guys know what to expect. We've got one of all four. Bastard, Brigand, Sprint, and Albion. Of course, the previous four Alba Dragons, which we can just reflect and see again that they're all Dark Attribute. 2500 attack, 2000 defense, very cool. And of course this one is another of those guys that lets you fuse when you fuse. Now that they've made it so accessible to get these cards though, I have to admit I'm a bit tempted to maybe try and build a competitive level like Alba's deck, because I mean, first I just get 3 of these, right? And then I'll probably want a few extra copies of those Ecclesias, but I think I pulled a few along the way opening my booster boxes and all that stuff, so it could be pretty interesting to see what I can make. Anyway, finally, let's see what's in this Recollections of Memory pack. Okay, and it's all going to be tokens, I believe. They are all supposed to be super, except one that we happen to get in secret, and hey, we got Ecclesia. Yep, so first these are the artworks that we saw on the back of the playmat earlier. They are all just tokens. So first we have Black Cloaked Albaz, Exiled Ecclesia, our secrets, the Tri-Brigade, of course. Is that literally just the name? Yep, the name of the card is just Tri-Brigade, featuring the whole gang. The 2 Saints, Flordelis and Ecclesia in the past. And finally, the Jester Elba, which looks like will be translated as Elber of the Wicked Dogma. And with that, we have finished our opening of Structure Deck Alba Strike. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, do give it a like. Let me know what you guys think about these new cards in the comment section down below. And don't forget to subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh! OCG booster box and product openings on the day of release. Hopefully, we'll get no more of these delays we've been experiencing so much recently. And with that, I hope to see you guys in the next Yu-Gi-Oh! video.